All right. Let's see. So we are live right now. Welcome everybody to the Nursing Leadership Network. I am your host, Noelle Coles, and I am excited about today's show to bring on our fearless leaders and special guests. We've got Lori Smith here, who is a former CNO and now an executive coach with Lori Lee Leadership. And we also have Marilee Arnold, who is a CNO at UNC Healthcare. So thank you, ladies, so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
It's okay. You can say thank you. Everyone can smile. We can talk now. I know it's a little overwhelming, I think, sometimes. But I'm really excited to have you both on the show. And I'd like to have you introduce yourselves a little bit to the audience. And I just want to thank everybody who's on the show and participating. If you are watching, please chime in. Let us know where you are chiming in from today. And any questions along the way, feel free to ask. Any feedback, because I'd like to engage the audience in the conversation as well. I think it's a really important discussion that we're going to have. So let's kick it off. Lori, I'll go ahead and start with you. Talk to us a little bit about you and how you got started in this role as a leadership coach.
Yeah. Well, I think my initial interest in leadership may have stemmed back to when I was 16 years old. My mom was a combat medic in the Army and served in the Gulf War and really piqued my interest in healthcare. So I started as a certified nurse's aide at the age of 16. And that's really where I learned to find my voice and be able to speak up when I saw something that wasn't right, or there was a safety issue, or maybe there were some ideas around how we as a team could do something differently. And I grew from there, went on to become an LPN right out of high school, and then got my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and am currently enrolled in a PhD program for organizational psychology. That's an entirely different story.
Wow.
And I started as a staff nurse and had zero interest in leadership, actually. Was encouraged by others to look into it. After I was a staff nurse, I fell in love with bedside care, and I just thought, this is great. I'm going to live and die here. I'm not going anywhere. And then decided to step out of my comfort zone and try something new, and really loved the impact that I could have as a leader to support the teams that I was working with, and to also be a voice at the table, to influence what we were doing for patients and for our teams. Because if we take great care of our teams, they take great care of the patients. And that's really where my love of leadership started to blossom.
I love it. What a great story, starting from your mother. I did not know that about you. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So talk about the pearls of wisdom you've gathered just from that alone. That's pretty incredible. And Marilee, what about you?
Well, let's see. Lori and I, one of the reasons I think that we connected so well is because we do have somewhat similar backgrounds. I say somewhat similar because my mom was not a combat medic or any stretch of the imagination there. But so my journey in healthcare started actually on the pre-hospital side. So I took an EMT class in college just for fun. It seemed like it would be a lot of fun, and to totally embarrass myself, I actually had a boyfriend at the time who was an EMT, and so he made it sound even more exciting. So I took that, and I realized how much I enjoyed that part of care and being able to meet people in their times of need and really make a difference. So I knew I wanted to do something in healthcare, but I wasn't quite sure what. So I took the progression from EMT to paramedic, moved to Florida along the way, realized quickly that while I have the utmost respect for folks that choose to work in fire prevention and in the fire service, it did not appeal to me at all. And largely, when I moved to Florida, most EMS was embedded within the fire service. So at that point, I'm like, you know what, this never really was going to be where I wanted to land. And so that's when I chose to go into nursing. And I've been kind of a why not me type of leader, right? Like I never saw myself as going into leadership, but in the absence of a leader, when there were periods of transition, I was an ED staff nurse for several years. Our leader went out on medical leave, and we really needed somebody to kind of guide guide and keep the department going. And I'm like, well, if nobody else wants to do it, I'm happy to help. And somehow I became the director just by offering to help. So most of my career has been with emergency nursing and then EMS in some way or another. And then we had an absence here in the CNO role. And I was like, well, why not me? I mean, nobody else is really fitting the bill, and I'm willing to try. I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen? I could fail, I guess. So I became interim a little over a year ago and permanent in October. So this is really my first year as a CNO.
Congratulations. And I love the why not me. That is like the best tagline that we're going to use, I feel, throughout this entire discussion, because when you think about that, it's so inquisitive too, right? Why not you? And then as you continue to go on into leadership, there's so many questions I feel that we ask ourselves, right? And that, why can't we do this? Why not me? And then we get those opportunities to do them. And then sometimes being inquisitive may also stop. And I think this leads into when we talk about what does it mean to have a coach? Because the more challenges you face yourself with, the harder it can become to then learn how to do what you do as good as you do it. And Lori, I want to bring this back to you to talk about, really, let's go back to the basics. Why leadership coaching? What is it? What are we missing out on for those that don't have a coach? And why is this so important?
Yeah, that's a great question, Noelle. First and foremost, healthcare. Sometimes we're bringing up the rear here, and other industries like energy and finance have been utilizing executive coaching for decades. We're starting to pick up on it more and more in healthcare finally. What really led me down this path is the fact that I had a phenomenal executive coach throughout the pandemic while I was the system CNO of an organization. And she had a phenomenal impact on my leadership and my ability with the team that I was working with to really stretch and grow my skills. And when I started applying those skills with the team, I started seeing that we were getting greater traction in some of the areas that we were really struggling with. And I started using some of those techniques with other organizations outside of my proper organization and the impact that it's having for their teams. And I thought, we need more of this in healthcare. Where is it at? And as I started looking, it was pretty limited. There were not a ton of options for what I was looking for as far as that one-to-one coaching and that true team coaching that really dug into your individualized and tailored needs. There were some things that were particularly for nursing, my respiratory therapy colleagues, even some of my physician colleagues. There were good C-suite opportunities, not as much outside of C-suite leadership. And so I really wanted to dig in and provide more of a service in this area. And it's certainly a need because there's a huge demand for it right now. And the impact that it's having for the groups when we uncover blind spots that we didn't even know we had, and some of those unconscious biases that we didn't know existed. Once you strip those back and start learning how to leverage your strengths, that's when you really start to see the difference with the teams.
Well said. And I think that, it takes, like you said, it takes the experience, right, to really understand that and really be humble with yourself, I think, as a leader to know that. And sometimes, you don't know what you don't know. And it takes someone that is a little bit courageous and outside the box to say, hey, I've got some thoughts for you, or, how can you do this? And they may not necessarily be a coach at the time, but we all need that moment to kind of take back and think about it and be like, wait, I didn't think about it this way. So Marilee, how did you get connected with Lori? And I'm curious, because I think as we look at a lot of the other CNOs or healthcare leaders that are out there, The thought of having someone by their side to really coach them through being successful in their role is there. But where do we start? So how did you get started?
Well, so I had made myself a promise, right? That when I first went into leadership as an ED director, it was the proverbial, well, you're great at the bedside, so you're gonna be just fine as a leader. And a lot of that I learned, trial by fire, right? And so even back then, I was like, I don't ever want to be a CNO. I can't do that. I've only ever worked in the ED, but if I ever do something else, I want to make sure that I have somebody to help me succeed, and so I can, you know, start out knowing that I've got the tools to be successful by partnering rather than trying to figure it out by myself. So I guess I learned that you don't ever say no, never, because that's not true, right? So when I was really seriously contemplating transitioning from interim to permanent, I was like, I need help. I feel like I can, figure out trial by fire like I did before, but this was not something that I had on my radar as everything was part of my career path. So maybe I didn't learn as much as I should have from people that, I reported to in the past. So I was fortunate that when I asked to have the ability to engage with a coach, I had full support from my boss, which was huge and very appreciated. And so then I was like, well, okay, how do I find one? So I had a list of folks to start with, and I was like, no, I really want somebody that is a nurse who has been kind of in my shoes, because I need some, I need some support as I grow into this role. And so I think some of it was just, good Googling. Some of it was luck, and some of it was just, having access electronically to things like AONL and then LinkedIn. And somehow I landed on Lori. I actually think I started following her before I ever thought about having a coach. And so she kind of came up in my brain when I was like, okay, well, I'm going to reach out to her and interview and see if this would be a good fit. So that's kind of how I got to Lori. I interviewed
what a score too.
Yeah.
So again, you brought up another really good point. You interviewed coaches. Now that's another good pearl of wisdom to have us write down for those that are looking for a coach, because I don't know if that would have crossed my mind years ago to interview a coach. And what was it about Lori that made her the right person for you?
I think part of it was just the level of comfort I felt just in that initial interaction. We connected on mutual experiences in the past. She's very easy to talk to, and I also am a nerd, and I love that she brought a scientific aspect into coaching, and so that kind of that resonated for me as well.
Science. It's always about the science. It connects all of us somehow, right?
That's right.
And thank you for sharing that, because I think that's an important piece for our colleagues that are watching too, is that you have a choice and there's an opportunity, and it's like a relationship, right? You have to make sure whoever you're talking to is the perfect fit for you. And Lori, so I'm going to bring this back to you a little bit too. When you started to embark on your career as an executive coach, what were some of the challenges that you were seeing faced by CNOs out there?
Oh my gosh.
We only have an hour.
It's so long. There are your traditional well-known challenges: staffing, overwhelm, multiple competing priorities, not enough time in the day. And there are so many that we are not always talking about openly, because we might think that we're the only ones that are feeling this way. Imposter syndrome happening, and we're not always talking about it. And honestly, pretty much everyone that I'm coaching has some level of imposter syndrome. Even CEOs have that feeling sometimes. Shutting down negative self-talk is another challenging one. Increasing strategic thinking is another area. Being able to get off the hamster wheel long enough to look at the big picture and see what's going on. Not getting caught in transactional leadership check boxes and tasks, but how do we really shift to being a relational and a transformational leader? Because that's where we know the real gains start to happen. Preparation for promotions. There are a lot of folks that are really working at what is my next level of advancement. Sharpening social and emotional intelligence, not just emotional intelligence, but really what does the big picture look for our teams when it comes to that? Increasing our influence, particularly for nursing. How are we that influential voice at the table? What does that mean? What does that look like? How do I bring my natural talents and skills into that to leverage my influence with the C-suite or national teams, policy, advocacy, whatever that might be? How do we lead during crisis? You know, there are crises that we're accustomed to, and then there's the pandemic level crisis, which is a whole other level of learning how to lead differently. Improving our work-life integration, because oftentimes as caregivers, we feel like it's selfish to take care of ourselves first. And really what the science says, even proving that through functional MRIs now, is that we are better collaborators, problem solvers, and critical thinkers when we're taking better care of ourselves. So you could almost flip that script and say it's selfish to not take better care of ourselves, because we will be much better for our teams and our patients when we do that. And then how do we increase our leadership agility? That's another challenge in an area, not just CNOs, but healthcare leaders across the board. And then mindfulness. What does that look like for us to keep a calm mind and understand how to navigate that during these tumultuous times? Because it's really challenging. It takes work to develop that.
Wow, you just uncovered so many amazing topics. I feel like if we had 5 hours, we should talk about them all, because I think it's so important to think about. And again, another strong reason why coaching is such a big deal to leaders, because all of those thoughts that you brought up are thoughts that race through everyone's head on a daily. And it's how do we unfold and navigate through them? So when you look at coaching, I would assume that this varies with each professional. Of how often do you meet? How long do you meet for? In my head, it's been a long time. I've being coached, but to me, if I had a therapy session, I'd do it like 3 times a week in today's world. But what is, talk us through a day in the life of what coaching looks like and how often. And with Mary-Leanne, let's use you as an example. When did you start, and how often do you guys meet, and how is that working?
Yeah. Well, so
I just unfolded a lot.
Yeah, you're good. So we kind of had a pre-kickoff where Lori oriented me to kind of what to expect and what our engagement would look like, and then our first real session was a full day in person. So yeah. So I know it was awesome. It was really awesome. Yeah. And she got to see where I am, right? So she got to see the little town that I live in, and she got to experience, being here. I was actually able to find a space for us to meet in the entire day where people essentially left us alone, which was also pretty amazing.
Wow.
Yeah,
that is.
It really did. Yeah.
It's good support right there. I love it.
I know, right? Well, it helped that we weren't actually in the hospital. So
yes, of course.
Yeah. And then going forward, we have kind of a cadence, and I'm so sorry, our overhead paging system is going off. We have a cadence now going forward, right? It's every 3 weeks where we connect by phone, and it's every quarter where we have that in-person full day again. So, and little bits of homework here and there too. So Yeah. So things that I'm working on that I learned from our first session and each one going forward.
So talk to me a little bit about the homework. What's that look like?
Well, the first homework that really created kind of the foundation of our first day together was doing the leadership circle assessment. So that, kind of answering questions about how I view myself as a leader and how I behave from my own lens, right? And then also having select folks that are around me, either as peers, direct reports, or my boss, providing feedback as well. Sorry, I'm just waiting for this.
So that's great because when you
medical alert, coach.
Oh, that's okay. I'll just talk over it. Don't worry.
Okay.
I love it. It's
we don't
real
need
life.
anybody else to hear it.
Who knows, right? It's
This
real.
is like talk about real live action, right? I love
know,
right? So the leadership circle assessment, is that, Lori, is that something specific, proprietary to you that you've created for your coaching? And is it, I'm curious to know a little bit more about that. Is it like a reflection tool?
It is a certification that I took to be able to deliver that assessment. And what I love about that assessment is that it delves so much deeper than some of the other assessments. It does a true 360. As Marilee mentioned, it gets feedback from your boss, your boss's boss, your peers, direct reports, other matrixed relationships that you might have. So you're really getting a lot of the layers of that onion peeled back to dig deep and see where is it that I'm excelling that I want to continue to do more of, and where is it that I maybe need to put a little bit of a spotlight on. And with the leadership circle profile, it really looks at creative leadership and reactive leadership. We know there's a negative correlation to focusing on what we have coined now as opportunities, right? Opportunities has become kind of this dirty word. Oh my gosh, I don't know where the confetti came from. Hand gestures are now automatically.
I just saw that too. That's amazing. I've never seen confetti.
That was super cool.
Wow. And it's recording, so that'll be a great playback too. I'll have to find that clip. That's amazing.
It seemed like it fit too. Like
it totally did.
Yeah. So we know that if we focus on what we call opportunities or weaknesses, that actually has a negative correlation to increasing your leadership effectiveness. We want to focus on strengths and creative leadership and finding that balance between people and tasks. We want to get results, but we don't want to leave a wake of bodies in our way. And we want to have good, strong relationships, but we don't want to sacrifice making progress and getting results at the same time. And that's really what that leadership circle profile helps to do. It helps us to create a roadmap for a leadership development plan that's individualized to your needs specifically.
My alarm is ringing. Hold on. You guys continue to talk. This is so embarrassing. Let me shut the door. I've got 3 great things.
So I think, Marilee, one of the good things about you and I meeting by Zoom every 3 weeks is it gives you a little time to think about what we've talked about as we've met that last time. But it's also not so far apart that you forget what it is or trail off from what you're wanting to keep as your North Star. It's a good sweet spot. 2 weeks is too soon. Anything more than 4 weeks is too far. So 3 to 4 weeks is a good cadence.
I agree.
Yeah, that's a really great point to bring up too, because you have to have some time, I would think, to really digest what you've taken in from Lori and think about whatever homework assignments you've gotten, because you have to. I love saying that because this is fun homework. This is stuff of like, who am I and how can I be better at what I do? And the more you can gravitate towards that, the more successful you're going to be, I would think. And Lori, I love how you put work and life integration, not talk about work and life balance. I did hear, I'm forgetting his name. He's the CHRO for New York Presbyterian. He was on a podcast and he talked very closely about work and life integration. And that was the first I've heard of that. And that's exactly what it is. To stress ourselves out to try to balance that out is what we've been doing for years, and it's not accurate. There's no such thing, I think, as balancing that out. We make a commitment to our work, we make a commitment to our families, and sometimes you have to give and take in certain areas. We do have a question in the audience from Peter Kirby, who is a fearless, awesome, amazing nurse leader up in the New England area. Hi, Peter. Thanks for joining us. So Peter has a question. What do you feel are the top 2 challenges in healthcare right now? I'm going to guess and take a stab at this, Peter, that you mean overall or specific to... Here I am with my nursing ICU brain, really trying to peel this apart and tackle it in 18 different directions when he probably is just meaning it very simplistically, huh? But I will leave it up to either one of you to answer for, first. Oh, he's okay. So he said overall. So what do you feel are the top 2 challenges in healthcare right now overall?
Marilee, what are your thoughts?
Well, I feel like obviously I'd be remiss if I didn't say workforce would be a top challenge. Just knowing the number of nurses who have pivoted away from acute care, the fact that we maybe aren't producing quickly enough from schools, and just people having a lot of options right now. It's really been challenging to find what is going to be appealing to somebody to come back to the hospital, or just to come to this hospital and to join the team, right? So money is great, but how do we really make it more about the total experience? And I think just knowing what we're facing, I think we're all to some degree trying to, have permanent hires and maybe less of, agency labor, contingency labor. I think we're all trying to do that. It's just, how many nurses are out there and available and want to come and be a part of what you're creating, I think is the number one challenge I know that I'm facing. And probably most of my peers would say the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
I would agree with that. And depending on what article you read or what list, there's a little bit of variation, but really what we're seeing, not just nationally, but globally, is workforce is number 1. You're absolutely right, Marilee. And that leadership development and coaching around that is a huge piece, because what we have always done will get us what we've always had. We need to start thinking differently. And we know the incredible impact that managers have on retention, workplace environment, and employee satisfaction. And how do we ensure we are equipping those managers with the tools to understand the neuroscience behind these human behaviors, like Marilee mentioned? We know that money is great. That's an extrinsic motivator. We also know that extrinsic motivation is short-term. If we want long-term results and long-term motivation with our teams, then we're digging into intrinsic motivation. And that is all about understanding what is your personal purpose? How does it connect to the organization that you are a part of? What is it that you bring value to? We all want to feel like we're valued, that we belong, we have some autonomy, that we have fairness within the environment that we work in. Those are all intrinsic motivators that in the end will ultimately lead to recruitment and retention.
Well said. And I could imagine that the more you have the ability to be coached and the more you feel comfortable within yourself, and this goes back to, we were talking earlier about muscle memory and how to speak. I think that adding that into having the exposure of you out in the community and out on places like this to talk about that brings a little bit of your own authenticity into who you are as a leader. And that would make me in itself want to come work for you. Because you're honestly, think about it. If a leader is putting themselves out there in a way where you are becoming vulnerable in a position that we didn't do this 5-10 years ago, right, Lori? This was not a thing. And usually, have your blinders on and you do within. But now, if you have the ability to be coached, to think differently, do differently, and say differently, imagine the opportunity that you are bringing and influencing on others wanting to come be a part of that organization. And so I'm excited for that next chapter with you. So let me ask, in the few months that you've been with Lori so far, what has been one of your most aha moments being coached?
Well, this is gonna sound kind of silly, right? I
I
I
love
felt
silly.
like
I'm a PD nerd.
yeah.
Go for it.
So, you know how you feel like I think probably there are some of us, most people know kind of what their challenges are unless they have some huge blind spots, right? But I think what surprised me the most when we had our first session was that they weren't quite so hidden as I thought. I was doing a good job hiding some of these things, right? Like I knew they were a problem, but I didn't know that they were so obvious to other people, which is a little embarrassing, right? But it was good feedback, right? Like, and really, I was blown away by the feedback that I did receive. I think people were very kind to me in the survey, which I probably need to write them all some checks because they were so kind in what they said. But they were very supportive with their comments, but also said, um, we need you to do this. We know you can. You just need to do it, right? It's
Mhm.
and sadly, that's something I've heard in different scenarios my whole life. I had a college professor that said, "You have great thoughts and insights. Please share them with the class." But I was so painfully shy that I really didn't want to speak up, right? So it's funny how those things kind of follow you through your whole life,
Mhm.
right? So it's being able to take a deep breath and think about why you're going to say what you're going to say, and then being brave and putting it out there. And I think that's, getting past my inner critic is the biggest bucket of work I
Mm.
have to do this year. So she's really strong. She's been harassing me my whole life. Yeah.
And if you find the cure to that, please let us all know, because you are going to be famous and worth millions. Because, I think we are all our own worst critics. And Lori, this goes back to talking about imposter syndrome, right? It brings on a whole new development and beast that if we don't really pay attention and understand what that looks like, it could take over us. And I can appreciate a lot of what you said, Marilee. There's so much strength in humility. And I think recognizing that and embracing the shy is exactly what you need to do. But it's okay. It's one of those circumstances where I think don't mistake my kindness for weakness. And you can still lead in the manner of who you are as a person. It's just how do you carve out those edges otherwise to be able to continue to move forward. And again, this goes right back to talking about why it is so important to have a coach. Lori, any comments to Marilee's feedback?
No, Marilee has been an absolute joy to work with, and I always look forward to our time. And when she talks about that inner critic and understanding the neuroscience behind that, I think that was a really helpful moment for her too, that this isn't a weakness necessarily. This is literal brain wiring.
Mhm.
The way we are built. It's a mechanism to keep us safe, to keep us from getting ourselves into any sort of physical or emotional challenges that might hurt us. And how do you overcome that? How do you shift all of that energy from the amygdala and really engage your prefrontal cortex to be able to have tangible strategies to overcome that inner critic? So Mary doing a phenomenal job making those connections.
You are making every neuro ICU nurse so happy right now, pulling all these terms in. You know what? It's real and it's true, right? It's not just coaching from the thought or an opinion or an emotion or an experience. You're bringing science into this, and it's something that we can all relate to and understand. And um, I was gonna, oh, I thought I saw one more comment. Okay, I'm gonna go back to you. I'm like squirrel right now. Sorry. I'm trying to really make sure we engage everybody at the same time as we're talking. And so I would ask the question too for those that are watching right now. Um, if you can give any sort of advice on how to get started in finding a coach, what would that be? I love Marilee's answer of going to Google and LinkedIn and then finding you, Lori. This is going to be a great platform for others to connect to you. But how does one find that coach?
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways to find a coach. Unfortunately, there's not one single pathway. LinkedIn is a phenomenal resource to be able to find a coach. You can just punch that in and find people who might be a great fit for you, add some specifics in there. Things to look for in a coach, I would say, would be ICF certification, the International Coaching Federation.
Okay.
It's really the gold standard for establishing competency as an executive coach.
Okay.
So one great credential to make sure that they have. And then understanding where they trained through, what is it that are their areas of focus. You don't necessarily have to have someone who walked a mile in your shoes. Sometimes it helps for certain situations that you're facing or dealing with. And sometimes it's great to have an objective set of eyes who look at things outside of what your traditional role is. I have physicians that I coach, CEOs, CFOs, COOs, because of that reason, because it's a different lens. So it really depends on what it is that you're looking for from a coach. And as Marilee said, interview your coaches. Find the right fit for you, because this is a trusted partnership that you're entering into. It's having that trusted advisor that doesn't have political skin in the game in your organization, right?
Yeah.
They're not worried about making somebody unhappy. They're not worried about stepping on toes or red tape. They're really, truly looking out for the best interests of you and your team, what it is that your goals are. So they've got to be a right fit for you, personality-wise, professionally, and from their expertise, where they've trained through. For example, I trained through the Hudson Institute, which is a classic coaching program, and also through the Neuro Leadership Institute, because as healthcare clinicians, that neuroscience of why are we behaving and thinking the way that we are, making sense of that helps us understand how to navigate it. So you've got a wide array of different coaches that are out there. Some people call themselves coaches and haven't had any training in how to be a coach whatsoever. I would be wary of that for sure, because the techniques that a coach uses are very different than what a mentor uses. Mentors and consultants really impart their wisdom upon you. They tell you how to do things, really. And coaches ask you powerful questions that help you connect the dots on your own. And that's where insight comes from. We know that you're better able to pull that insight and learning way down the road during future hardships if you've created insight versus rote memorization. And that's a key component to executive coaching. So those are a few that I would look for in a coach.
You know, I want to go back to a little bit of what you said when we look at the difference between a leadership coach and a mentor. And you really touched very closely on that, because that question comes up often that I hear, that what's the difference between a leadership coach and someone who mentors, and having that clear delineation is very key. Can you touch base a little bit more on the differences between a coach and a mentor?
Yeah. I might actually go just one step farther than that and talk about a few different areas. So we talked a little bit about what a coach is. A mentor is usually someone who is assigned to you. There's less choice about it. Occasionally there's choice, but they're really giving you the operational wisdom, how they do things in a specific job role traditionally. When we think about a consultant, they're usually paid to come in and solve a specific problem. And again, impart their wisdom on this is how you go in and you tackle this, and this is how you solve that. Counseling is really looking at your past and how do you deal with that and handle that. We do talk a little bit about that in coaching. Coaches are not counselors. They have a specific skill set that is so highly valued. You want to leverage someone for that. As coaches, we're really looking at how do our behaviors and our past experiences impact us moving forward, particularly when it comes to the healthcare profession and healthcare leadership. What is helping us excel and what's getting in our way. So those are really some differences there. The coach isn't telling you how to be a leader. The coach is helping you find that answer in a way that works best for you, because tailoring and individualizing your learning leads to those insights that really solidify that and help you build on it in the future.
What a great point. And I think so much about new leaders coming into their roles, whether it be a nursing director or CNO, to be able to have that opportunity. Because I think if we do get stuck in the concept of having a consult or a mentor, your success is going to plateau. You're not going to, is the way that I see it, you're not going to have that ability to think differently and strategically beyond having a coach by your side. Now, is there ever a time where you don't need a coach anymore?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And here I'm like, no, there's not.
So I'm laughing about this because I still have a coach, right?
Yeah.
I just have grown so much from having my own executive coach. That there are people who use coaches for years and years and years. And there are people who use coaches for 6 months or 9 months or 12 months. It really just varies depending on what your needs are.
Marilee, so you just started your journey with coaching with Lori. Where do you see yourself in? So if you think about when you started coaching or being coached to where you're at now, obtaining the information, and where you see yourself in 6 months from now, what do you think is going to be one major success and accomplishment for yourself to obtain in the next, let's say, 6 months that you didn't think you would have without Lori?
Well, I think just understanding why I respond the way I do. I don't know that I would have necessarily made that connection without Lori's help. But also, I think, and Lori, if I butcher this, please jump in and correct me. But, it's going to be hard work to redirect how I've continually reacted for years and years and years, right? With my inner critic being so loud, my amygdala being so loud, right? It's like laying new train tracks in a different direction, and my body keeps wanting to go, and not flip the switch and go the other way. So it's going to be a lot of work to rebuild those pathways in the right direction. But I think 6 months from now, I want to, maybe my inner voice that is constantly telling me I'm not good enough will be quieter. I would love if she left, but I also would like to not get hit by a bus. She's useful in that respect, but but I would like her to just be a little more quiet and not the first thing. And, maybe it will become, I'd like 6 months from now to be like, okay, I know that I can do this. I can speak up. I have nothing to be afraid of by speaking up, and I'm not going to, be ridiculed. I'm not going to lose my job. I'm not going to be looked at and be like, oh my God, why is she even doing this job? She doesn't know what she's doing, right? All of the things that inner voice is saying, you imposter, right? But 6 months from now, I want to be at the point where I'm not thinking, there's an imposter that is in the room. It's not me. I won't be an imposter then.
I love it. I love how you talk about your inner brain that way. It reminds me of that movie with the emotions, and I'm losing track. Oh God, what's the name of that movie?
Oh
With
gosh.
the angry guy, and he's
Mhm.
blowing up with the fire out of his hair. That's what that reminds me of, because it's so true. How do we hone in on
Yes.
all of that? There is one thing that I used to teach my leaders all the time, and that was consistency hardwires practice. And I
Mhm.
think it's the same concept with yourself coming into leadership, being consistent with what you're learning and being consistent with your actionable follow up, and how you say what you say will help hardwire that piece of it. And it will quiet that little devil that's sitting here on your shoulders to tell you the things you shouldn't tell. But it's great to see someone really committed to the listening of what your coach is saying, because it just speaks really truly to who you are, Marilee. And for anyone even watching this, I mean, I would sign up to work in your facility any day. Because if you have that humbleness to really reflect back, you're creating a culture of safety in your entire organization, to be humble and recognize that we're all not perfect. We all are learning, and that you're willing to take the criticism, learn from it constructively, and get better at what it is. And it's okay to trip and fall, right? It's okay to eat dirt a few times. We've learned to love dirt over the years, and that's because we're just being humble as leaders. And again, putting yourself out there and having somebody like Lori to coach you through that to get out there is going to speak volumes for the work that you're going to do, I think, moving forward. So, Lori, I want to kind of take that piece of it and pivot back to you, thinking about current nursing leaders that are struggling out there. What kind of advice do you have for them right now, and what they can do? And I mean, really struggling in their roles of, do I
Mhm.
stay, do I go, and how do I
Yeah.
navigate that, especially those that don't have a coach?
Yeah. So creating those trusted advisory groups and
Mm,
working outside of your organization. The
mm,
connections that we've all made on LinkedIn are a gold mine.
mm,
If you can tap into peers who are facing some of the same challenges that you are and help to problem solve together, that is an incredible resource to have at your fingertips, and it doesn't cost a dime.
mm,
Understanding how you can leverage simple tools that don't cost you anything, like mindfulness and breathing exercises. When we talk about neuroplasticity, and as Marilee mentioned, our neurons are building these train tracks, right? And they like the comfort of that. To pull the switch and start building a new train track takes a conscious effort.
mm,
Doesn't always take a lot of money and resources to do that. You can stop the judge in your brain and shift to the sage in your brain with your prefrontal cortex by simple things like box breathing, inhaling for a count of 4, holding for a count of 4, exhaling for a count of 4, holding for a count of 4, because your brain has to think about what you're doing there. And
mm,
you're feeling the breath coming and going. So it's no longer your lizard brain or your amygdala taking over and hijacking everything. It's a conscious effort that you're making.
mm.
Reduces your heart rate. It tells your body, okay, I'm safe. I'm not in danger. And then you can start to critically think and be a little more rational with what it is that's going on. Lots of different techniques out there. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm constantly trying to put out little pearls of wisdom and tidbits that people can use to help improve their leadership, and just to help improve their overall well-being. It
Mm.
helps us at home, not just at work, when we learn some of
Yes.
these techniques.
Yeah. And that's so key. I love your little pearls of wisdom. Every time I see them, I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And in this, we're talking, I mean, we've been leaders for decades, right? And it's just, sometimes it's also what you see at the right moment that you see it. And I could have read something yesterday, and it may not impact me the same as it would 2 weeks from now, depending on the circumstance that I arrived with. And and I would say, Marilee, taking that all back into consideration, really planting those seeds in your brain that you're learning from Lori, because the situations that come up are going to be different at different times, but it will hardwire. What advice do you have for other CNOs, Marilee, that are watching right now that might be challenged or struggling in their role?
Well, I would say don't be afraid to ask for help, right? I think sometimes it feels like it's something that you shouldn't be talking about, right? Or oh, gosh, I shouldn't admit that I have a weakness, but it's okay to ask for help. I mean, I chose to move into this role permanently because I want to make a difference, and I see the ability to do that here. It's going to take a lot of hard work on my part, and it's gonna take work with my team, but I need to get myself together and, move to the next level, Marilee, so I can do all of that. And that's where I knew I had to ask for help. So I would say ask for help. And maybe your path would look a little bit different. Maybe you don't see the commitment level that I've chosen to have with Lori is what you need. But I think it's worth asking for help and seeing what's out there.
I love it. So last question that I want to just throw out to the group and to both of you, any other parting words of wisdom or advice that you may have? I know we talked a lot about Marilee, I can't wait to go back into this because you have dropped so many great pearls along the way. There's gonna be so many short clips coming up because I really think that you were one that really honed into your inner self. So give yourself a lot more credit than that person who's sitting on your shoulder. And because of the advice that you've given us in the last almost hour coming up of what we need to think about and do as leaders. And I look at Lori, you had mentioned leadership agility. There's so many factors I think that come into this that I want us all to think about. But any last parting words that you would want to share with the audience right now?
One thing I would say is something very simple to do. We are so much more kind to others when mistakes happen or we see something that's maybe not going the direction that we like. We are much, much more harsh and unkind to ourselves with that inner voice. So what would you say to someone else who's in your shoes that you were mentoring or that you cared about? Because that's what you should be saying to yourself. You deserve that kind of love and respect just as much as someone else would receive. So that's really what I would say. It's challenging right now. Be kind to yourself.
God, I almost shed a tear on that one because it hits home. It's you couldn't have said that any better. It's so true. Why do we do that? And I think that's something to think about. We're so empathetic to so many, but we just beat ourselves down. So thank you for that. Marilee, what about you? Any last parting words for those that are listening?
Gosh, it's hard to follow what Lori just said, right? I mean, but it is really true. As nurses, we take care of everybody else. We care about what's going on with them. We tailor our message to kind of meet them where they are. But I know that I don't do that for myself, and I should. Right? I mean, I'm not an exception to the rule. I should have the grace that I'm willing to afford to everybody else. So.
Well said. And for those of you that are watching, Lori, is there anywhere that they could, besides LinkedIn, that they can follow you? We could drop it in the I want to say in the notes, but in the comments below, just let them know. But you can log in. God, I'm talking like this is 1980s. I swear. You can follow Marilee or Lori on LinkedIn. And if anyone wants to get a hold of Lori and really touch base on her executive coaching, role and what she does, please reach out to her. As you can see with Marilee firsthand being coached by Lori, I jump on it in 2 seconds. So Lori, I hope for those that are watching, get ready because we're going to fill up that calendar of yours. Just knowing Lori, personally and professionally now, this was really a wonderful opportunity. And I think, not just talking with you, but actually really talking to someone as amazing as you, Marilee, who's new into your role and also being coached, is really helpful for everyone to hear because it's as authentic as it can be. So I want to thank both of you for joining the show today. And I look forward to keeping in touch with both of you and really watching your career, Marilee, as you continue to go on. So this is goodbye for now, but not forever, because I'm so excited to see how this transpires for you. So thank you both for being on the show, and I will see everyone soon. Take care.
Thank you for having us, Noelle.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.